Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajaganarandana Yashodanandana Yashodanandana Brajaganarandana Yashodanandana Brajaganarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Brajaganarandana Yashodanandana Brajaganarandana Yashodanandana Brajaganarandana Yashodanandana Brajaganarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna
Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Kari Vrajagachacha Stotra Satya Sri Simad His Divine Grace Chirabai Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki
Jai.
ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki
Jai.
Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki
Jai.
Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki
Jai.
Harinam Sankirtan Ki
Jai.
Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki
Jai.
Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.
All glories to the assembled
Hare
devotees.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled
Hare
devotees.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled
Hare
devotees.
Krishna.
All glories to Sri Guru and to Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanvitam Hai Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpa Tirubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayana, Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasya Namaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantharaj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya,
Sri Krishna Chaitanya,
Prabhu Nityananda,
Prabhu Nityananda,
Sri Advaita Gadadhara,
Sri Advaita Gadadhara,
Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda,
Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare,
Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya,
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 Om Surabhyay Namaha,
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 Om Surabhyay Namaha.
Mukham karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam, Yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. We are reading from Canto number 1, chapter number 1, entitled Questions by the Sages. For those who were not attending this Bhagavatam class yesterday, some of you were, some of you were not. We are hearing the prayers being offered by the sages of Naimisharanya. They are addressing Sutta Goswami, and in a very humble manner requesting him to speak on various subject matters. So yesterday we read text number 12. I believe we also read 13.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. We read 2 texts yesterday. Sometimes we do that. And so we will go to text number 14. Apanaha Samsrit sometimes okay, some mark is there. Samsritim Ghoram Yan Nama Vivasho Grinan Tataha Sadyo Vimuccheta Yad Vibheti Swayam Bhayam Apana samsritim ghoram Yanama vivasho grinan Tata sadyo vimuccheta Yad vibheti swayam bhayam Apana samsritim ghoram Yannama vivasho grinam Tata sadyo vimuccheta
sadyo vimuccheta
yadvibheti swayam bhayam
yadvibheti swayam bhayam
apana samsritim ghoram
apana samsritim ghoram
yannama vivasho grinan
yannama vivaso grinan
tata sadyo vimuccheta yadvibheti swayam bhayam
yadvibheti swayam bhayam.
Who has learned it by heart?
आपन्नः संस्कृतिं घोराम्
Apana samsritim ghoram
यन्नाम विवशो गृणन्
yannama vivasho grinan
तथा सद्यो विमुच्येत
tata sadyo vimuccheta
यद्विभेति स्वयं भयम्
yadvibheti swayam bhayam
आपन्नः संसृतिं घोराम्
apana samsritim ghoram
यन्नामः विवशो गृणन्
yannama vivasho grinan
ततः सद्यो विमुच्येत
tata sadyo vimuccheta
यद्विभेति स्वयं भयम्
yadvibheti swayam bhayam. One more. Disappeared. Modern technology.
आपन्ना संस्कृतिं घोराम्
Apana samsritim ghoram
यन्नामा विवशो गृणन्
yannama vivasho grinan
तथा सत्यो विमुच्येत
tata sadyo vimuccheta
यद्विभेति स्वयं भयम्
yadvibheti swayam bhayam. Apanaha,
आपन्नः
being entangled.
being entangled
Samsritim,
samsritim
in the hurdle of birth and death.
in the heart of birth and death.
Ghoram,
ghoram
too complicated.
too complicated
Yat,
yat
what?
vat
Nama,
nama
the absolute name.
the absolute name
Vivashaha,
vivasaha
unconsciously.
unconsciously
Grinan,
grinan
chanting.
chanting
Tataha,
tataha
from that.
from
That.
From that,
Sadhyaha,
sadhya
at once.
at once
Vimuccheta,
vimuccheta
gets freedom.
gets freedom
Yat,
yat
that which.
that which
Bibheti,
vibheti
fears.
fears
Swayam,
swayam
personally.
personally
Bhayam,
bhayam
fear itself.
fear itself.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Living beings who are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna. What to speak of chanting consciously? Which is feared by fear personified. Kindly repeat after me. Living beings
Living beings
who are entangled
who are entangled
in the complicated meshes
in the complicated meshes
of birth and death
of birth and death
can be freed immediately
can be freed immediately
by even unconsciously chanting
by even unconsciously chanting
the holy name of Krishna. He's about to go again in Samana. Purport. Vasudev, or Lord Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is the supreme controller of creation, who is not afraid of the rage of the Almighty. Great asuras like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and others who were very powerful living entities were all killed by the personality of Godhead. And the Almighty Vasudeva has empowered his name with the powers of his personal self. Everything is related to him, and everything has its identity in him. It is stated herein that the name of Krishna is feared even by fear personified. This indicates that the name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. Therefore, the name of Krishna is as powerful as Lord Krishna himself. There is no difference at all. Anyone, therefore, can take advantage of the holy names of Lord Sri Krishna, even in the midst of greatest dangers. The transcendental name of Krishna, even though uttered unconsciously or by force of circumstances, can help one obtain freedom from the hurdle of birth and death. Translation again. Living beings who are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. So in this way, the sages are of Naimisaranya. We can see by this particular statement here, they are quite advanced sages. And they are making reference to the potency or the power of the holy name. They understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, he is the supreme controller who can very easily destroy the most powerful of demoniac personalities, as we read in the pages of the Bhagavatam. And this same power that the Lord displays that's power he actually invests in his holy name. And what is, of course, very remarkable here is that, well, that in itself is remarkable, that the Lord does not himself directly have to be present, since he is fully present in his holy name, simply by taking shelter of the holy name. That holy name can give us the same protection as the Lord. So that is, of course, one of the special features of spirituality. In the case of Krishna, Krishna's holy name, Krishna's transcendental form, his Archa Vigraha, Krishna's Leela, his pastimes, all are completely transcendental, and whoever either accidentally or intentionally, whoever comes in contact here it mentions even unconsciously can be delivered from the very, very difficult cycle of birth and death. Here the word mesh is being used. How, and we all have our individual experiences as well. All living entities who descend in this material world become completely entangled by the modes of material nature, and to become freed from that entanglement is not at all easy. Actually, it is impossible. It is impossible for the ordinary living entity, just like it is impossible for an ordinary person, even an extraordinary person, to swim across the ocean, isn't it? Even though one may be the greatest swimmer. This is, of course, explained in many places in the Shastra, how the material world is completely entangling the living entity, because that's another aspect also. The external energy, the external energy of the Lord, Maya Shakti, because it is coming from Krishna, is also extremely powerful. And Lord Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that because it is my energy, one cannot so easily become freed. One can only become freed by taking shelter of the higher potency of the Lord, which is His internal potency or internal energy. So Prabhupada explains, just like when Krishna descends in the material world, his appearance in the material world, his various activities in the material world, because the Lord remains always fully transcendental, although he appears in the material world, he's never affected by the material world. So therefore, Janma Karma Samay Divyam, my appearance and my activities in the material world are completely transcendental. And that verse goes on to explain, anyone who actually understands this and takes shelter of me, takes shelter of my energy, likewise also becomes unaffected by the energy of Maya Shakti. Janma Mritu Janma Karma Samedivyam Evam Dyobeti Tatvataha Tyaktva Deham Punar Janma Naiti Mamiti Sorjana. So this is the power and the potency of the Lord, and anything in relation to the Lord as well, especially for all of us in Kalyuga, as it is nicely being explained here, especially taking shelter of the holy name. And of course we hear how in the Shikshastakam prayers, Lord Chaitanya explains how all of the potencies or energies are invested in the holy name. And that is why the devotees of the Lord, they can go anywhere in the material world as long as they take shelter of that internal potency. They will not only be protected by the Lord, but they are guaranteed of no longer being forced to repeat this or to remain in this non-ending cycle of samsara, of repeated birth and death. So the sages are pointing this out, actually, because they already have, we can understand by their prayers how they are presenting, how they are glorifying Sutta Goswami. We can understand that they are already advanced devotees. And as advanced devotees, they understand the unlimited nature of the Lord's potencies and energies, and are eager, as we were reading in the last few verses, they are eager to hear more about the Lord, and how by in this way remaining connected with the Lord, those unfortunate souls who take birth in Kalyuga, especially because it is such a difficult period, those few and rare fortunate souls, this is what awaits them. They will be able to sever or break or cut this connection with the cycle of birth and death. So naturally, this is this is the greatest boon that awaits such living entities. And we hear in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya how, because at that time when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, the rule of the day was not Hinduism. Yeah, and when devotees would sometimes chant in public, they would be harassed or criticized in different ways. Or it is explained that some of the Muslim people would make fun of them and in jest or in laughter repeat the holy name. But sometimes it would backfire. Means they they found themselves becoming obsessed with the holy name, and even those who were not seemingly affected, they still received the benefit of the holy name, even though they were possibly repeating. Some years back, in the early days, there were different situations whereby sometimes some unfavorable articles were written, because in the early days in America especially, very few people understood about Krishna very few people had seen people dressed the way we are, wearing some clay on their forehead, and even though very young, no hair on the head, except something in the back. Very strange. And in those days, devotees didn't know that you had to tie your sika, So some devotees had like really far out sikas, hippie-like sikas. And so it was not unusual for people to criticize, and sometimes articles were written. And of course, whatever was publicized, devotees would bring it to Srila Prabhupada just to let him know, get his feedback. And then Prabhupada would always ask the question, have they mentioned the name Krishna? If they mention the name Krishna even once, it's a good article. That was also, Prabhupada would explain that his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would judge any article written by one of his disciples by the number of times Krishna was mentioned, isn't it? And the more often the word appeared in the article, it was a good article. And if no Krishna name appeared, not so powerful. So that means actually for us that as instructed by our acharyas, as instructed by Srila Prabhupada himself, and as instructed by Shastra, simply we need to take advantage of this reality that's being explained here by constantly taking shelter of the holy name or anything that is in relation to Krishna. Just like remaining in the association of devotees is most essential because they remind us of Krishna. I mean, just by seeing them. Of course, very often they will remind us by telling us, chant Hare Krishna or whatever. And especially, Srila Prabhupada explains how in Kalyuga the special a feature or aspect to keep in mind is that, and that is why Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared to introduce this congregational chanting of the holy name. Of course, chanting alone is good, but chanting with others is even more powerful, because in Kali Yuga it's extremely difficult. I mean, in previous ages people could make a tangible advancement in spiritual life, maybe go to some cave somewhere in the Himalayas. But in Kali Yuga it is the whole atmosphere is extremely polluted, isn't it? Even sometimes we see, we see pictures of sadhus with long matted hair holding a cell phone. I mean, just to indicate that no one can escape the modern kind of lifestyle and technology, and therefore the whole atmosphere around the world is extremely polluted. It's just like if one is living in, like it would happen in the past, like it's happening right now actually. There was one writer, French writer, Albert Camus, his name, La Peste de Camus. La Peste, the little bit like we have this pandemic. So he wrote a whole book actually how in some city in France, he's a French author, there was a whole, it started on a small scale and then within a very short time, rats started to die and then it was spread and then people started to die and not. So when one lives in such kind of atmosphere where there is where one can easily become contaminated. So this is the kind of situation that we have. I mean, we have the experience this year, especially, of this COVID-19, how it's affecting literally the entire world. So Kalyuga is of that nature. The more there is an increase in sinful activities, the more there is, and actually modern day society is practically speaking glorifying sinful activities, advertising, inviting people to take intoxicants, etc., all of these things. And anyone who let's say from a village goes to a city, within a very short time becomes, due to bad association, starts to engage in all kinds of sinful activities. So it means that actually to protect ourselves, we need to take various steps or measures by which we can actually be protected by the strong influence, very negative influence of the Kalyuga, due to the strong focus on so-called material enjoyment or material happiness. And we can see in front of our very eyes that the more people engage in material sinful activities, and nowadays, as we know, this is because it is being encouraged on a large scale from a very young age, when young people are supposed to be totally protected from such activities. And Prabhupada would explain that is why Gurukul is so important, because one who attends Gurukul is taught and trained in such a way that he will remain a complete brahmachari till the age of 25. I was speaking to one Indian young man some time back. No, not a young man. I was speaking to someone who was once upon a time a young man. So he was telling that, I remember in our days, not until the age of 20 did we come to know about, sex life. Because the tradition was such that, and the arrangement of Vedic culture is such that one is properly trained to actually remain celibate. He's focused on good activities, pious activities, spiritual activities, and there is that natural segregation between men and women, traditionally we don't have, as we experience in modern day society, the kind of propaganda, isn't it, very very prominently promoted. People spend huge amounts of money actually to promote all kinds of illicit, bad activities. So, in other words, we have allowed. That's why our present generations of young people find it extremely difficult and are generally involved in all kinds of bad activities, and and therefore Srila Prabhupada therefore wanted that we demonstrate the proper lifestyle, the proper way to live, and that at least a small percentage of the population, those who are more intelligent, those who are more fortunate, will actually become attracted. And Prabhupada used to say, well, just like I came to your country, and practically speaking, everyone was heavily under the modes of material nature, but some of you have taken up the process. So it means it's not impossible, even though someone comes from a totally alien background, as it is the case, in the Western countries. There's absolutely no Vedic culture. There's no remnants of the Vedic culture in the Western world. At least in India, there are traces of that, but the influence of Vedic is so powerful, so strong, that even in the land of dharma, adharma is on the increase. So this very important point that is being made here, that in the same way that Lord, when we read about the activities of the Lord in dealing with all kinds of very powerful personalities, demoniac personalities like Kamsa and Hiranyakashipu, etc., very easily defeated them. And knowing that the Lord, and also the Lord's holy name, and the Lord's transcendental form, Arsha Vigraha, is as powerful as the Lord. Therefore, simply by taking shelter of that holy name, simply taking shelter of the very process of Bhakti, devotional service, because that is also Krishna. Bhakti is actually Krishna. By doing so, we also can be protected from this bad influence, and the end result, of course, is that we can break this tie, or this attachment, or this connection with we can end this repetition of birth and death. And even before that, it's also nicely explained in different places how we can actually become completely transcendental to the modes of material nature. We can even become transcendental to the threefold miseries of life. So if one is transcendental in this way to the modes of material nature and to the threefold miseries of life, that means that one is completely situated on the transcendental platform. That is possible even while in this material body, even while in this material world. Such is the potency of Krishna and Krishna's internal energy. So this point is being mentioned here. I'll just read the verse once again. Living beings who are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately. That's another point. Immediately. Can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Jivatma is which potency connected with more internal potency or marginal potency?
Jivatma is defined as the marginal potency.
Marginal potency.
Yeah, marginal potency. But that marginal potency has the choice of either taking shelter of the internal energy or taking shelter of the external energy. When we take shelter of the external energy, then we suffer because we remain under the modes of material nature. We identify ourselves with the body, and we simply continue birth after birth in the material world. So as marginal energy, this is our the freedom that has been given to us, and if one is fortunate to come in contact with this process, with this knowledge, with devotees, then one will come to know, okay, I have to mold my life in such a way that I am constantly under the internal energy of Krishna through bhakti, through activities of devotional service, through the chanting of the holy name, and through many other activities, the favorite being taking prasadam. It's also a transcendental activity. This is the choice that the living entity has as marginal energy. Yeah.
Maharaj, you were mentioning now beyond the modes.
Going beyond the modes.
Beyond the modes. So, especially when we condition ourselves, when we come to this material world, so at that time we are with some modes, definitely, and we came in touch with Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
And bhakti is, the practice of bhakti is beyond the modes.
The practice of pure bhakti is beyond the mode.
The practice of purity is beyond the mode. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, in the purest stage is beyond the
Correct,
mode.
yes.
So with our contaminated state we came and we are practicing the pure thing, the purest thing, bhakti, with our contaminated state.
We are practicing the purest, by taking up these different activities.
Especially the holy name.
Yes, yes.
So by chanting the holy name and by practicing the purest of the things, so is it expected that we come within this lifetime beyond the modes?
The question is it expected that beyond this lifetime we become beyond the modes?
Yes.
That's the question.
Practice of bhakti.
What does the verse say here? Immediately. Not one lifetime. The same question was asked a number of times to Srila Prabhupada. How long it will take? Is it possible within this one lifetime, which is what you're asking? So Prabhupada would say, within a second. Within a second.
Katwanga Maharaj.
Huh?
Maharaj Panga.
Yes. It is a question of individual, we could say, decision and determination. It's just like some people are in Krishna consciousness for many, many years and they continue to struggle, and others only a relatively short, much less than others, let's say, and they are totally blissful and completely engaged in devotional service, and in other words, it's not a question of time. It's not a question of years. It's a question of each individual to take the matter very seriously. By taking the matter very seriously, one will attract the mercy of Krishna, without which we cannot actually transcend the modes of material nature. So it is very much It is simultaneously up to each individual living entity to take up the matter, and of course it is not only based on our activities, but when we take such kind of major decision, Krishna, who is everywhere within our hearts, he knows, he understands, and he immediately will reciprocate by he's the one who is Mukunda, awarding us mukti. And that mukti is from the modes of material nature. So Prabhupada did explain also that our program, the program of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is based on the chanting of the holy name, is such that within this lifetime, within one lifetime, one short Kalyuga lifetime, isn't it? That within one lifetime, what normally would take many lifetimes, in Kalyuga, by the special mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the power that is invested in the holy name, and the mercy of Gauranitai is such that what was practically unthinkable and impossible in previous ages. That is why I always remember one particular small example one devotee was giving about Srila Vyasadeva, who was, in his ashram meditating, and a few sages, some sadhus from the Himalayas, so many sadhus are there, a couple of them had some doubts, and they were wanting to clear their doubts by approaching. They had doubts about, they were fearing Kali Yuga is coming, what will we do, and etc. like that. They were very much in connection with the sages here in Naimisharanya. And as they were discussing like this amongst themselves, as they approached the ashram of Srila Vyasadeva, they started hearing more clearly, the mantras that he was chanting. And as they approached, they could hear very clearly. And his chanting of mantras was actually a glorification of Kali Yuga. They were puzzled. Why he's glorifying Kali Yuga? So they reached the ashram, offered their obeisances, and in a humble way immediately requested, we have other doubts, but we have one before that. As we approached the ashram, we were hearing you chanting mantras and glorifying Kali Yuga. Why Kali Yuga is, everyone is fearing Kali Yuga, and you're glorifying Kali Yuga. And then Srila Vyasadeva very nicely explained how Kalera dosha nidhe rajan asti hi guna kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangram rajat. That simply by taking shelter of your holy name in this Kali Yuga, one immediately less than one lifetime immediately can actually become liberated. Yeah. So that is a special, very, very special and unique feature of the Kirtan movement. And that's why Prabhupada would also say, anyone who, just like here it's mentioning, even unconsciously somebody hears the holy name, he gets immense benefit. So Prabhupada would say something similar. Anyone who sees my book or touches my book or reads one line or even one word of my books, they are on their way to become liberated because they have begun their process of devotional service. Anyone who actually begins the process, then it's simply a matter of time. If he becomes very serious about it, immediately, even before the end of his number of days in this present body, he can become liberated from the disentangled from the modes of material nature. and unaffected by the threefold miseries of life.
Yes, Guru. So now when we are practicing, we are having the faith on these kind of verses, as you said.
Yes.
And at the same time, we are have our own duties in respect to one of the Varnas. We have our own duties.
We have our own duties, yes.
To perform.
Yes.
So, we know that the practice will take us deep, and we have the faith. At the same time, we have to respect the modes, or because any Varna is in modes. But any Varna is in modes.
I will correct you.
Yes.
So your statement is that we know these are wonderful verses we hear and read in the Bhagavatam, but after all we're still in the material world, and we have to respect the Varnas, and the Varnas are in the modes.
Yeah.
The Varnas are in the modes when we are in the modes. Otherwise the Varnas are not in the modes. Our occupation, which is Varna, means there are different occupations. Naturally, being in the material world, we have to do something. And generally that something, that occupation, those activities, are connected with generally one of these Varnas, isn't it?
Yes.
Regardless of which Varna it may be, if we perform, just like Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, Guna Karma Viveshaha. Guna Karma. Karma means actually activity. Guna means quality. So we may be in any of the Varnas, including Shudra Varna, but if our consciousness is Krishna consciousness, that Varna is no longer material. That is the meaning of Daiva Varnasrama. That Varna becomes Daiva, divine. So Prabhupada speaks about Sana Dharma, Varnasrama Dharma, as divine culture. Divine culture. Those who are not developing this divine culture, this culture of bhakti, this culture of devotion to Krishna, devotion to Krishna, they're being situated in some particular varna means that they are still connected with the gunas, modes of material nature. So in other words, there are two levels or two ways in which we can be engaged in a varna. I can be a taxi driver and be absolutely in Maya, as probably many are, or I can be a taxi driver and completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So the activity is secondary. What is important is the consciousness. So that means that we need to do something, we need to do some activity in the material world, and the prescribed activity as given in the Bhagavad Gita falls within the category of Varna and Asrama. Varnas, isn't it? And when those activities are performed in the right consciousness for the satisfaction of Krishna, for the pleasure of Krishna, as authorized in the Shastra as well, then it's no longer, isn't it, no longer a material activity. And that's why Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur very nicely explains that activities of Varna, or activities of Varnasrama, when performed in that consciousness, do not create karma. Those activities become bhakti. Those activities are transformed in bhakti, devotional service. So that is very important to understand actually, because the goal is bhakti, but that goal of bhakti can be attained by performance of any kind of activity as long as it is authorized in the Shastra and as long as we perform it in the proper consciousness. So one can be a sweeper his whole life, but if his consciousness is right, he is a a pure sweeper. He's a sweeper in pure consciousness. So he's a liberated soul by sweeping. He's sweeping his way back home, back to Godhead.
So somebody is inclined to one seva, like example of sweeper. That means why he is inclined for the whole life to do only sweeping is because it is what he is comfortable with. Is it so? Like that we have to understand.
The question being, why is it that if somebody is a sweeper for his whole life, that is it because he's comfortable in that service?
Yes.
Yeah. Generally, according to our physical and psychological makeup, we will be inclined or attracted to some particular seva or service or activity. Of course, in Krishna consciousness, even somebody may be a sweeper, if there's a need for him to do some other activity, then for the service of Krishna or for the service of the Vaishnavas or Guru, one may take up other activities. It's not that we are having to perform that same service all the time. So it will depend, but generally speaking, because we do have from birth a particular makeup, before we come to Krishna consciousness, we are molded in a particular way. So generally we will fit more easily in some particular varna. But as we develop this higher consciousness, Krishna consciousness, the varna in many ways becomes secondary, and just like if somebody lives in a temple, it's more, let's say, easier to understand in a temple situation where there are many services needed. It's like there's cleaning to be done, there's cooking to be done, there's deity worship to be done, so many things to be done. And sometimes, a devotee who may be, let's say, Brahmana, he may have to do all of these different activities. As Prabhupada would say, it doesn't mean that because I'm a sannyasi, and I'm taking the broom to clean the temple, that I become Shudra, So within a temple situation where one is living in a community, one may be requested to take up a variety of services. The varna comes out, especially more so, I would say, in general society, where one has to interact and take up different activities. Of course, even there, theoretically, even in general society, in a village, for example, as opposed to a temple, even in a village, someone who's a devotee, even though he may be known, for example, as a carpenter or whatever, he may perform other activities. Although generally speaking, one that's, we could say, the special feature of the Varnasrama system, generally one will traditionally be taking or sticking to the same kind of activity or profession. But because he's performing that activity, whatever it may be, in Krishna consciousness, therefore he is anyone of any of the varnas, by performing in proper consciousness, they become